Hey guys, before the video starts, I want to know how many pounds of hamburger or ground meat do you think we will get from 2 deer this year? So drop your guesses in the comments below and then stay tuned for the video to see if you were close. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be processing some of the deer meat that we got this year. So I was lucky enough to get draw tags, which is where you enter a lottery for specific tags. And I got a draw buck mule deer tag and a 2 draw doe tags. So I was able to fill all 3 of those tags. Unfortunately, one of the does that I had shot had been previously shot and her gut content had kind of exploded within her body cavity and it had turned a lot of the meat rancid, so we only got about 20 pounds from her. But after some testing, she also tested positive for CWD, which is chronic wasting disease. And so if you haven't heard of that, it is a disease that gets passed from deer to deer, usually through soil contamination, and it's extremely detrimental to mule deer. They are very susceptible to getting it and seem to have the most death along with getting this disease. And so there's no 100% proof that CWD is transferable to humans. There is a lot of research surrounding what sort of transmission level may be available. In monkeys that have a similar genetics to humans, it's what we call a model species in science. They can get CWD from eating infected brain material. Obviously hunters, that's fairly low risk. So yeah, basically it's up to you if you feel comfortable consuming meat from a deer that does test CWD positive, but just because she had additional health issues going on and potential gut contamination, we are choosing not to consume this meat. So we are going to hold on to it and take it south with us to a landfill that is approved for disposal of CWD meat. We definitely could dispose of it up here, but since there aren't mule deer up here, we don't want to be possibly transmitting it and potentially spreading it to anything else that might get it. It's very, very low risk of that happening, but just want to be on the safe side. So now that I got that out of the way, today we are going to be processing the meat from the buck that I got and the doe that I got. So when we drove south for this hunting trip, it was about a 22-hour drive altogether. Obviously, that's a lot of meat to transport over a long distance, so we went ahead and we deboned all the meat and vacuum sealed it in these bags, and then we labeled each bag with which animal it was using their tag number, so that we would easily be able to separate out if any of them did test positive for CWD. So we are going to be taking these out. I kind of did a rough cut when I deboned everything, so there's definitely some trimming that needs to happen. So we're gonna take everything out of the vacuum seal bags, trim it up, grind it, and then sometimes we do like roasts and steak cuts and do more of like a cut-based selection of meat from our deer. But this year we are doing 100% ground. We just grind up our meat exactly as it is, and we use that instead of using ground beef. So that is what we're gonna be doing today. Possibly carrying over in tomorrow because this is definitely a big job, and while it doesn't look like there's a lot of meat here, there's definitely a good amount. So I am going to do a weight and see how much meat we get off of 2 deer at the end of the video. So with that being said, I'm going to start getting these upstairs and we are going to start the process.
You guys will have to bear with me. This is my first time trying a voiceover, but there is just too much work to be done to worry about stopping and taking breaks in between to kind of discuss what I'm doing. So I'm going to try to explain some of the stuff that I'm doing while this clip is playing in the background. Like I said, we deboned the meat and put it into vacuum seal bags, but there is still quite a bit of trimming that needs to be done. And specifically why we're doing that trimming is we want to make sure that there is like no hair or like dried chunks of meat that's going to end up in our ground. And then I'm also going through and removing as much of the fat as possible. So the buck especially had a lot of fat on it, and while there's nothing wrong with consuming the fat of venison can kind of have a specific taste to it that's a little bit less desirable. So we just choose to try to trim it up and make it as lean as possible, and then we add fat back in using butter or some other type of fat when we're actually cooking the meat. And then the other thing I'm also removing is what's called the silver skin, and it's just a kind of very tough layer that encapsulates the meat and the different muscle groups, which gets really, really tough to chew when you're trying to chew it. So we do try to remove as much of that as possible as well, especially on kind of like the bigger muscle groups on the leg, and also on the back straps and like shoulder pieces. So that's basically all I'm doing for the next clips, is just trimming up all of the meat that we are going to be grinding up, just so that it's all ready to go when we grind. This was a very long process. Unfortunately, my partner was very ill this day. He had just got back from a work trip and caught a very, very nasty sinus cold. So usually when we do this with two people, it takes a lot less time, but because I was doing this almost entirely by myself, the entire process took about 9 hours from start to finish. So I'm going to go ahead and let this play, and then I will hop back in when we get a little closer to the next step. The other really handy thing is that as you are trimming the meat, this is a really good opportunity to actually cut it down into smaller pieces that will more easily fit into your meat grinder. This is something that I actually didn't do for the first little while for this clip, and then had to grab a cutting board and cut them into smaller strips while I was trying to grind it. So there is another quick little processing tip for you.
Well, we're about halfway through. We've filled up our bucket. That is all of our trimmings. And we have about half the laundry basket left. So we're going to take a quick pause from trimming, and we are going to grind what we have in the bucket. So I have my grinder all set up with some meat bins, and the meat is already cut into chunks. So all you have to do is turn it to grind, which is all the way at the bottom. Oh, helps if you turn it on first. Just like that. And then you just drop the pieces in. Like that. And you have ground meat.
So as you can see here, I did have to grab a cutting board and cut the pieces a lot smaller than I had when I was trimming them. And then we're just feeding everything through the grinder. You can see when little bits of the fat come through in the lighter meat. And I don't get too worried about getting absolutely everything off, because a lot of time the blade that is inside the meat grinder will collect a lot of the extra silver skin and some of the bits of fat, so it doesn't have to be a perfect clean trimmed piece of meat to do it. Just mostly focused on getting like all of the biggest chunks off. So yeah, we grind up our meat. We just do one pass of the grind. If we were going to be making sausage, we would grind the meat and then we would send everything through the grinder again, mixed in probably with pork fat, to make our sausage mix, which then we mix in spices and then put it into the casings. But like I said at the beginning of this video, today is just about grinding up the venison to have for different kinds of meals and just vacuum sealing that as plain ground meat. So the grinder we got from Cabela's Canada. It's not their Pro Series line. It's more one of their mid-range lines, but we really enjoy it. It is very quiet to the point where you can actually have a conversation while it's running with somebody and you don't have to feel like you're yelling or like you can't hear the other person. I've definitely had some other grinders in the past that were a lot noisier. So as you can see, we are perfectly able to do this in the kitchen and not worry about it being too loud or having to wear earmuffs or anything like that. So that's been really good. We've had it for 2 or 3 years now probably, and it's not the biggest grinder ever, but it's actually worked really well. So the entire grinding process, which was about 1 deer's worth, only took about 37 minutes, which is pretty good. So we definitely enjoy this one, and I will put a link to the exact one that we got in the description below for you guys.
All right, it is 7:30 p.m. We are about 6 hours into this now, and I just finished trimming up the last of the bit. So we have half of it ground, all of it trimmed. So now I have to grind the other half, and then we got to bag it all. So it is definitely going to be a late night. Okay, obviously very different day, different makeup, all that kind of stuff. It's actually been almost 2 whole weeks, I think, since we did all the grinding of the meat. And that is because we had sickness go through our house, and so I haven't been feeling well this past week, and my partner wasn't feeling well even actually the day that we were processing all the meat. He did feel a little bit better towards the end, so he was able to help me vacuum seal all of the meat. So I weighed it all out, and then he would vacuum seal it and label it, and then we got it downstairs into the freezers to freeze. So now I can show you what 9 hours total of work pays off into when it comes to processing. So we have a full deep freeze of ground meat. So these are all measured into approximately 1 pound servings. It's kind of between 1 pound and like 1 pound 2.5 ounces, somewhere in the middle of that. I wasn't worried about being too like perfectly accurate. For everyone who guessed at the beginning of the video how much meat 2 deer will make, we ended up with 101 bags of meat, which is approximately 101 pounds, give or take. I'd say maybe like 20 pounds because of the slight, or maybe not 20, maybe 5, just because of the slight variation with them not all being exactly 1 pound. But yeah, so that is all of our ground meat for the year. I realized after filming the video and looking back at the footage, I really didn't explain a lot of what's going on, so I'm gonna like preemptively add in some voiceovers to try to help explain what we were doing. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully YouTube doesn't take it down. It's kind of 50-50 on if they take this kind of content down or not. And I hope you guys enjoyed a little glimpse into what the whole processing part of hunting looks like. Once again, we don't raise meat animals up here, so hunting is and has always been our source of meat. And so this is what we get to do with it every year. So I have no idea how long this will last us. I'm gonna try to do my best to keep track. But you know, if you think of it in terms of there's 365 days in a year, 101 of those meals will be used up with this. So 2 deer for our household probably isn't actually enough to last us an entire year. So that's why next fall we're really hoping that we will be able to get a moose up north here, instead of having to drive south to go hunt for smaller deer. So with that, I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and give this video a like if you enjoyed it. See you guys later.